Welcome to today's Grad Prof Dev webinar focused on faculty salary negotiation. My name is Heather Brandt. I'm Associate Dean in the Graduate School and Professor of Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior in the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina, and I'll be presenting today's content. Today's webinar builds on the American Association of University Women's Start Smart Financial Literacy and Salary Negotiation Program. The Start Smart program here at USC is conducted with the Student Success Center. And if you are interested in the basic Start Smart program, in spring 2020, we'll be offering Start Smart on February 27th and March 30th. And you can get additional information on the graduate school's website through the calendar. An overview of the Start Smart content will be reviewed very briefly before getting started on faculty salary negotiations. But before I begin, I have a few reminders for those of you who are live viewers. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the webinar toolbar. For today's webinar, we do have some handouts that are available under the handouts ribbon on the webinar toolbar. And if you have questions during the webinar, enter questions under the questions ribbon also found on that webinar toolbar. If you're viewing the live version today or the recorded version and you're interested in getting a PDF of today's webinar slides, you can email gradprofdev@sc.edu to get a copy of those. I'm going to be turning off my webcam now so that you all can see the content more fully on your screen. So give me a moment to do that and we'll go ahead and get started. Before I begin today, I have a really important disclaimer to share with you. The information provided in today's workshop on faculty salary negotiations is intended to be instructive but general. Work with your mentors and trusted network of advisors to make sure your approach is consistent with your discipline and with the institution type at which you are negotiating. So what I mean by that is the level of the position, whether it's a tenure track position, whether it's a visiting professorship, whether it's a lectureship or instructorship, those types of positions and your ability to negotiate will matter by discipline. And your mentors are a great source of information. Some of the information I'm going to share today will apply regardless, but there are often nuances to consider and think about when negotiating appropriately and competently for a fair salary and benefits. So just to recap, for today's workshop, information presented will be largely general, and it's important for you to work with trusted mentors in your discipline for the discipline-specific information. I also want to remind you that today's workshop is really going to be focused on general processes of faculty negotiations, which vary considerably by institution and also may vary considerably within institution by college or department as well as type of position. So as I mentioned, the webinar today will include this very brief overview of key concepts that are discussed in the AAUW Start Smart program. Then I'm going to jump into the 4 steps that are the main focus of today's webinar. First, know yourself. Second, gather information. Third, negotiate. And fourth, assess multiple offers. The webinar will conclude with an overview of some professional development resources for you, and there will be ample time for questions and answers at the end. So first, a basic overview on the preparation steps in the salary negotiation process. Some of you may already be familiar with the core components of salary negotiation, and as noted, it's highly recommended that you have taken the Start Smart program before this particular webinar, and if you haven't yet, I really encourage you to do that. The AAUW Start Smart program focuses on these 4 main steps to salary negotiation. Know your value, know your target salary and benefits, know your strategy, and that means understanding how to approach negotiation persuasively and strategically. And finally, practice, practice, practice. The importance of practicing out loud and often as you prepare. In addition to these steps, along each of these four, it's important to engage with mentors and trusted others during this process. The Start Smart programs are really designed to provide skills and confidence needed to successfully negotiate salary and benefits, but as you know, the Start Smart program is also a general program. So we have tried to take these key concepts in Start Smart and apply them more strategically to focus on faculty salary negotiation. So this first overview is going to be the more general Start Smart overview, and then moving into faculty salary negotiations specifically. So first, you are your own brand, and it's important for you to not only know your value as someone who's going on the faculty market, or maybe you already are on the faculty market, but being able to convey your brand and convey your value in a way that's going to demonstrate your preparedness and your benefit to joining a particular institution. So one of the recommendations that is used for building your brand identity and knowing and conveying your value is creating a value statement. You can have 3 to 5 or even more value statements ready to aid you in your negotiation. A value statement generally has 3 components, and you will find that these components are presented in various orders. So first, your accomplishments; second, your skills; and 3, the results of those accomplishments and skills. So take a few moments, not right now, but in the future, to work through making a list of your accomplishments. What are your main accomplishments? What are your main skills that you have been able to acquire or develop or enhance during your doctoral or terminal degree program? And what are the results that you have produced? Have you published? Have you secured grant dollars? Have you established relationships and partnerships with key colleagues and contributors? So accomplishments, skills, and then results. And then you can frame that into a value statement. I accomplished X using my X, which benefited me, which benefited my institution, which will benefit your institution by in this way. So those are how you then organize those accomplishments, skills, and results. So again, in the future, take some time to think about how you'd succinctly describe yourself, your abilities, your accomplishments, and make sure that you talk to your peers and talk to your mentors to help frame 3 to 5 and even more value statements that can become helpful in the future. Only you can most effectively articulate your value. And this is an important aspect of conveying your brand to prospective employers, and in this case, to prospective institutions that are going to be interested in bringing you on in some type of faculty role or in some type of role wherein you're going to be putting your doctoral or terminal degree to work. This includes the faculty salary negotiation process as well. Your value statements for faculty positions may include also describing your fit with the unit or department and institution and how you will contribute. So not only looking back, but looking forward in how you know and convey your value. In the Start Smart program, there are 6 steps to benchmarking your salary and benefits. These 6 steps are fairly universal, and I will actually be using many of these steps later in today's webinar when I apply them to how you would go look at the faculty market and come up with a suitable salary as a faculty member. So these 6 steps are a general guide, but are again very applicable to faculty salary searching. So the first step is to research and identify a comparable job title. And in the case of faculty positions, you can use the standard assistant professor, which is most common for people who are completing a doctoral degree or a terminal degree and are looking to join the academy in some capacity. There are others, such as visiting assistant professor, lecturer, instructor. There are other titles that are out there that you can use depending on what you're interested in. Of course, also postdoctoral fellow, research fellow. So there are other examples. Second, find the salary range and establish your salary. Third, identify your target salary range. Fourth, create a realistic budget. Fifth, determine your resistance point, which is in essence your walkaway point, the point at which you're no longer willing to accept the position. And sixth, assess the value of benefits, because the salary may not be what you would like, but there may be benefits that could help compensate. So first, let's start with establishing a target salary range. Now you've selected a job title. Let's just use assistant professor, for example. It's now time to start your research. And you know it's important to set a target salary and target salary range in advance of the negotiation process so that you can negotiate effectively for a fair salary instead of focusing on a single salary number. That if it's not this number, then I'm no longer interested in this position. You want to establish a range that is going to allow you to pay your bills, to live comfortably, and to achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. It's also important to set a walkaway point or a resistance point so that you're able to exit the negotiation when a potential employer's salary that's offered is perhaps unfair and perhaps even inequitable. So using the job title of assistant professor, we're going to think through a target salary. So later in today's webinar, I'll be providing you with ample data that are publicly available that you can use to examine the median and mean salary ranges for assistant professors. So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, through the Chronicle, there are faculty salary data available. And for Carnegie designated highest research institutions, assistant professors come in at a median range of $93,320. Now this is across all particular disciplines, but when you go down to high research, you see $78,857. And when you look more in depth at other data, including data from the Survey of Earned Doctorates, you will see that range drop considerably. For example, in the humanities and arts in academia, $50,000 all the way up to business management and administration of $120,000. So depending on your specific discipline, you're going to work to gather market research to establish a target salary range. And you think about what the number is. So what's your number that you think is appropriate to compensate you? And this is based on your market research. And once you have that number, you then want to stretch that into a range. And usually it's recommended that the target salary sets the bottom of the range. And then you stretch somewhere between 10 to 15 to maybe even 20% to establish your range. This is important for later when you're going to engage in negotiations and try to ensure that your ultimate salary ends up in that range. You also have to think about your walkaway point. Your walkaway point is not the bottom of your target salary range. The bottom of your target salary range is your ideal target salary that you feel is appropriate, and that's often set at or near the median for your position in a discipline and the type of position that you're looking at. So the walkaway point is different for everyone, and it's really hard to put parameters on what the walkaway point is going to look like because it's going to be so different, and it's going to be informed by the type of position, the geographic location where the position is, your budget. And speaking of budget, Another important part of preparing for salary negotiations in the academic environment is making sure you have a realistic budget. So as a doctoral student or as a terminal degree student, you may be living on an amount of salary that is much less than what you are going to be earning as a faculty member. And you may be living in a lifestyle that is different as a result of not having access to that amount of money that is coming for you next. And so you have to think about a realistic budget. And if you aren't currently budgeting, which is the case sometimes, you have to create a realistic budget. And that budget should include a number of different factors, from your living expenses, so that mix of needs, like these are things you need to survive, these are the things you want to survive well, for example, and listing those out and the estimated cost per month. You can use various tax calculators that are available online. NerdWallet is a great resource, and there are also cost of living calculators out there. In addition to the fact that I would guess many of you, if not most of you, are living on a budget that's much less than what you'll be making after you secure your first position after completing your degree. The realistic part is important because cost of living in Columbia, South Carolina also is less than cost of living elsewhere. So for example, if you're living here in Columbia and you're making $30,000, you may need to make $50,000 in Washington, D.C. Of course, that's not a good reference for faculty salaries, but just to give you an idea of the considerable change in how much it costs to live here in Columbia, South Carolina, compared to other places here in the United States and even internationally. Of course, there are places that are less expensive as well, and you would want to make sure to identify what those differences would look like too. A resistance point or your walkaway point is really challenging if you are pursuing a faculty career in a discipline or in a department for which there are so many applicants. So for example, in some disciplines within the humanities, there will be 500 plus applicants for a single position. And so if you happen to be selected for that position, you are going to have a hard time saying no to whatever is offered. And that's part of understanding the market. So that's, again, a discipline-specific nuance that you would want to make sure that you're having conversations with your mentors to help guide you through. But in general, based on your market research, based on your realistic budget, you should determine a resistance point. And again, your resistance point or your walkaway point is not the bottom of your salary range. The bottom of your salary range is designed to be your target salary. And then you go 10, 15, 20% up to establish your range. And then you have a walkaway point that at this number, it is no longer appropriate for me to accept this offer that's been given to me. And I understand the context of making that decision can be very challenging. And sometimes we're in a position where an offer is at our resistance point or even lower than, and we have to accept it for the time being. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can stop looking. You can always pursue additional opportunities, but it's important that I acknowledge to you that I do understand the context and the challenges with a resistance point. As I mentioned earlier, salary is not the only aspect of a negotiation for a faculty position that you want to negotiate. Benefits factor in as well. So if you've thought through your salary, what is the dollars and cents number that you would like to bring home ideally, and you've looked at your budget and things work, then you want to think through benefits. And here are some examples of different benefits that can be negotiated. Some of these may be included as part of a standard package that's presented to you as a faculty member. Sometimes you have to ask for these things. So for example, moving expenses. If you are leaving Columbia, South Carolina to move to California, so let's say you're moving to San Diego, California, you've accepted a faculty position there, depending on how much stuff you have here in Columbia, your moving expenses could be quite considerable. And so you don't want to come out of pocket for those. And so as part of the negotiation, you could see what would be available for moving expenses. And moving expenses include not just transportation of your goods, but also transportation of your vehicles, getting you to the end destination. Are you going to be able to visit in advance? What about climate controlled or other forms of storage? So even within each of these bulleted items, there are a number of ways in which you can negotiate. Flex time, how many days do you need to be physically present in the office? Academia comes with a lot of autonomy, but if you're maybe not living close to campus or you're going to be commuting for a short time, you could find out if there would be options for you to not have to be on campus certain days perhaps when you're not engaging in research and scholarly activities or you're not teaching or instructing. There are probably other benefits that aren't included here. These are just this is just the list from the Start Smart program. So a few tips for entering your negotiation. Hopefully you do take time to think about how you can convey your value to a prospective employer and have some of those value statements to help underscore your benefits and what you will bring to the table at an institution. You always want to remain positive and flexible. So when is the last time you negotiated for something? If you have a partner, if you have children, even with your parents, you're sometimes negotiating. You also negotiate when you buy things. And one of the examples that is classically used when talking about negotiation is if you've ever purchased an automobile, for example, or if you've ever purchased a large ticket item for which there was negotiation possible. Remaining positive and flexible is an important strategy so that you don't dig in your heels until it's absolutely time, because you want the negotiation to be a conversation. You also don't want to get personal about things. This can be really hard when you're negotiating from a position where you perceive yourself to be at a disadvantage, and that could be for a number of reasons. But it's very important that you stay professional and don't get personal. Think through your employer's reactions and responses, and the only way to do that is to really practice the negotiation. So put the time in to know and convey your value effectively. Do your market research so you can establish a target salary range, a walkaway point. Make sure that you have created a realistic budget as part of this process, and make sure that you've thought through the benefits. The more prepared you are, the more able you will be to anticipate how the employer will respond. And remember, when you get to the point of negotiating salary and benefits, the employer has picked you. They want to make it work. It's going to save time and money for them to have this work out for their negotiations with you. So a few things I want to remind you about in terms of this negotiation process is being prepared to deflect when you're asked certain questions. So first, what are your salary expectations? The recommendation from the AAUW Start Smart program, as well as from a number of leading organizations who discuss pay equity and salary negotiations, is to say, I would prefer to react to a salary that you provide to me versus lay out my expectations up front. This is important because you want to make sure that you get an offer of salary. You may get an offer verbally, ask for it in writing before you respond, because that gives you an understanding of where the employer is at, and then you can refer back to your market research, to your target salary range, and go from there. So when somebody asks, what are your salary expectations, that is a good response to say, well, at this time, I would rather not give my salary expectations until I know we're moving forward with you offering me the position. Can you please tell me your salary history? This is actually now illegal in several states, and there's a bill pending in the South Carolina State House. Disclosing salary history has been part of the rationale for low pay and pay inequities that have been observed, part of that wage gap that we see between different groups of people and different people within the same types of employment sector, even those who have the same educational background and experience. So in this case, you're going to want to deflect if someone says, can you please tell me your salary history? It's also highly irrelevant when you're moving into a faculty position to be asked this question, because you may have been on a fellowship, you may have been in a graduate assistantship, you may have been teaching classes. So certainly you're not earning a full-time salary at your current level of education and experience. So it's unlikely that this one will be asked. The first one, what are your salary expectations? We do know this has happened to doctoral and terminal degree students who've been asked this during the course of the interview process, but the salary history one is probably less relevant. You will sometimes hear, I need to know what salary you want in order to make you an offer. Well, I think it would be important for me to know where you're starting in the faculty offer range so that I can react to this. So I would like for you to make me an offer first, and then I would be happy to respond to it. However, at this time, since you have not yet offered me the position, I would like to defer until that time. That's a perfectly fair response to respond to this particular question. So be prepared to deflect, and this is partially, again, anticipating how an employer will respond. And in the case of faculty negotiations, the person with whom you are negotiating may differ by institution, and it may differ by degree program, department, unit within the institution. So for example, sometimes these conversations happen between a department chair or a unit chair and you. Sometimes it's between the dean and you. Sometimes it's HR, human resources is involved in this process. So it could be different people, and so you want to be prepared to respond professionally and appropriately. I can't underscore this part enough. It's very important to get your offer in writing. And this is important because it gives you something concrete to what you can respond to. There are instances where you may be offered a position verbally over the phone, and this could be due to the time required to get a formal offer made. And I'm going to give you a very specific example that relates here to the University of South Carolina. So faculty searches that happened in fall 2019 may have come up on the winter break deadline. So if a faculty search committee met that last week of December before winter break, made a recommendation to the chair for a particular candidate, the chair agrees. The chair then takes that to the dean agrees. So now it's time for the chair to begin the process of preparing an offer, working with the designated HR or human resources professional in the college. So that's all happening, but it can't happen fast enough before the winter break. So in this instance, the chair may call a candidate and say, we want to offer you this position, or I am offering you this position. However, due to the winter break, I will not be able to get this to you in writing. You can still at that point say, I'm very appreciative of this offer, and I look forward to getting it in writing. So without engaging in any conversations or discussion or negotiating about X, Y, and Z, just simply stating that you're appreciative of the offer, you're excited about the offer, however you want to respond to the offer, you can do that verbally. And then hopefully an email or some other written communication would follow that interaction. And if it doesn't come from the chair at that time, you can send an email to the chair and say, I enjoyed speaking with you earlier today. I am pleased to know that you will be giving me a written offer for this faculty position in this department at this institution after the winter break. So now you've established a bit of a paper trail to acknowledge your understanding of where the situation is. So in the last about 30 minutes or less, I've given you an overview of what usually is a 90-minute to 120-minute workshop on the 4 steps to salary negotiation: knowing your value and being able to convey it effectively, knowing your target salary and benefits, thinking about your negotiation strategy, and then lastly, before I move on to the faculty-specific part of today's workshop, make sure you are practicing. Practice with your peers, practice with your mentors, come up with a written value statement, your target salary range, ways in which you feel comfortable negotiating, how will you respond to various statements in terms of your deflection points, and then making sure that you get things in writing as well. So for those of you who are joining live, remember you can type your questions, which I will address after I present the content today, using the questions ribbon on the webinar toolbar. And if you are interested in a copy of the slides from today's webinar, you can email gradprofdev@sc.edu. All right, now on to faculty salary negotiations. And the first part, believe it or not, aligns with the know your value part and be able to convey your value. And so I've characterized this as know yourself. What I mean by this is taking time to make sure that you know yourself and what you want in a faculty position. So this relates somewhat to your search process. And again, I want to acknowledge that the search process for faculty positions varies substantially across discipline. For example, in some disciplines, there are more positions than there are applicants. However, there also are disciplines where there are many more applicants than there are positions. And so in some cases, you still need to think through the path that you want to take, and will have to be more persistent in some ways than in others. So thinking about what do you want to do, and what type of environment is going to be best suited to support your success as a faculty member. So I'll use the assistant professor position again. So if you're interested in a tenure track assistant professor position, thinking about what does this institution look like in terms of its composition of assistant professors, and then specifically within the department in which you would be working, what does that composition look like? Are there senior mentors? What type of mentoring programs are available? What type of programs, resources, services are available to support your research and scholarship, to support your teaching? What kind of service activities are there? What is the teaching load? These are all considerations if you are considering a particular position in an institution. So take some time to think through answers to these questions and more to make sure that you're prepared to know what kind of environment you need to be most successful. There are a number of self-assessment and reflection tools that are available to you, and self-assessment and reflection are critical activities for your professional development. These are not just things you do one time and then never again. There are several resources available to help you consider how your interests, skills, and values shape your desired career path, and help you consider other lesser known paths of which you may not be aware. And again, this is done more than once during an exploratory period while you're gaining additional knowledge and skills in graduate school, and then again throughout your career. So I use these particular strategies all the time, and I continue to revisit my own interests, skills, and values, and reflect on how they do or do not align with my path. And so self-assessment and reflection can really be helpful to having you think about your preferred work style. What are your professional values? In which environments do you do your best work? How do you prefer to do work? Are there spaces in which you do not perform well? So these are just a few examples. You also can access resources through the Career Center, in addition to the free resource that I've featured here, which is Imagine PhD. And there are a number of other career assessments that you can find online too. So in knowing yourself, aligning this back with articulating your value, it's not only can you articulate your value, it's how well can you articulate your value. Because before you apply for jobs, and as you apply for jobs, and then should you have the opportunity for a phone or virtual interview, on-campus interviews, follow-up interviews, you want to be able to do this well. And this is very much connected to knowing yourself, the way you think about work, the way you do your work, and what environment can support you being most productive. So what are your career plans? What are your professional goals? And your ability to be able to put all of that together comes back to the fact that your ability to negotiate effectively is more than just the salary. It's more than just the numbers that you're going to see on a piece of paper. It also has to feel right to you. And I say this in full acknowledgement, again, of certain disciplines where there are challenges. So as you're thinking about it feeling right to you, there's this concept that is largely for organizations, but has some personal relevance too, from Jim Collins, called the hedgehog concept. And so it is that intersection at the middle of those three circles, the area shaded in black, that is really what you're striving for. What can you be the best in the world at? What drives your economic engine? And what are you deeply passionate about? Hopefully you are pursuing a doctoral or terminal degree in this space. So what can you be the best in the world at? Well, in terms of you as an individual, what are you really good at? What are the skills that you bring to the table? So your knowledge and skills are this, and these are going to be important to getting you to that shaded area. What drives your economic engine? Now, individually, that is, what can you earn a living doing? How can you earn a salary and have the funds and access to those that you need to be successful? And what are you deeply passionate about? This has virtually universal relevance in that, what are you excited about? Do you love this work? And hopefully, again, you are pursuing a degree that's going to allow you to get into those shaded areas. But if not, how can you get there? And you can figure that out through this process of self-reflection and assessment. So lastly, here are just a few questions that I hope you have answers to as you're thinking about going on the faculty market, or as you're on the faculty market, or maybe even further down the process, and perhaps you have applied, perhaps you have had phone or virtual interviews, or perhaps you've even had the opportunity for on-campus interviews and are maybe awaiting a decision. Knowing yourself is very much connected to your ability to be able to negotiate successfully and effectively. Gathering information is very much aligned with the Start Smart part of the program on knowing your target salary and benefits. So gathering information in academia is a little different. So here are just some examples of where you can get information on the academic job market, and more specifically, end up getting information on various institutions or various types of positions within disciplines. So the AAUP, or American Association of University Professors, the Chronicle, Inside Higher Ed, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Survey of Earned Doctorates, various professional organizations. For example, in the American Public Health Association, through their Career Mart offerings, they routinely have information about careers in public health across various sectors and provide some information on the market. Networking. doing informational interviews. And if you're unfamiliar with the informational interview concept, we did a webinar last fall on how to do a successful informational interview, which is basically a 30-minute conversation with someone who is doing work that you would like to do. And so in this case, it could be someone who is an assistant professor, perhaps in the last 2 or 3 years at an institution, the size of department, the teaching load that you desire, and talking to them about how they ended up there. This is important information to add into your repertoire as part of your market research. And then, of course, mentors. Your mentors are great sources of information. But most importantly, you want to make sure that you are doing market research, so doing your homework to put you in the best position. If you know yourself and if you know the market, you are going to be well positioned to negotiate for an offer that will have an outcome that is pleasing to you. So in terms of the labor market, I'm sharing with you some research from the Pew Research Center, which routinely does research on various generational shifts in the labor market. So there's been an unprecedented generational shift in the workforce over the last few years, and coincidentally in leadership. So as the baby boomers are retiring and moving out of the labor workforce, younger folks from earlier generations are being asked to assume greater leadership and responsibility earlier in their career. This sounds great, but you want to be ready for that opportunity. And the case has been that with technological advances and other changes in how work is done, the number of positions has also somewhat shrank over time. So Gen X, by volume, has been unable to keep up with the transition. Thus, the reason why subsequent generations, in particular the millennial generation, has been elevated to moving up as part of that transition. So these data are actually originally from the US Census Bureau, and then the Pew Research Center also takes a look at these data. In some fields in professional societies, you'll find commentaries on this. So for example, Peter Weddle, through the American Public Health Association, recently put together a program that takes an outside-the-box look at how the U.S. workplace and job market are constantly changing and what those changes mean for professionals in that field. This is why it's important to talk to people who are doing work in your discipline. And so while today I'm providing a general overview, I do have more limited understanding about the faculty market and landscape in other disciplines. And so I'll give you an apology in advance for so many public health references, although I will try to mix it up as I do have examples. So this particular slide here shows you another way of looking at the changes in the labor market. And so there are lots of resources out there that will help you see general shifts in the labor market, especially as the baby boomers are leaving. So these again are from the Pew Research Center and also from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And so this is important information for you to file away and have an understanding about. And then now this is just the general labor market. So then we have to get into specifically faculty related issues, which would include doctorates. I apologize, I do not have other terminal degrees, only doctorates that are reported through the Survey of Earned Doctorates and other resources here. So what you'll see in this particular figure is the number of research doctorate degrees that have been awarded by US institutions in 2017 declined ever so slightly to just under 55,000, and this is according to the Survey of Earned Doctorates. Over time, the number of doctorates awarded shows a strong upward trend with an average annual growth of just over 3%. You'll also notice that there are periods of slow growth and even decline over the years that are depicted. The Survey of Earned Doctorates began collecting data in 1957. And so some of the information that they can share more broadly is that Research doctorates that have been awarded in science and engineering fields has exceeded the number of non-science and engineering doctorates, and this gap has only continued to widen. So from 1977 to 2017, the number of science and engineering doctorate recipients has more than doubled, while the number of non-science and engineering doctorates awarded in 2017 was actually slightly lower than the 1977 count. So let me recap that. So for the 40-year period of 1977 to 2017, the number of science and engineering doctorate recipients has doubled. For non-science and engineering doctorates, the number in 2017 has actually dipped below the number of that was awarded in 1977. So as a result, you can see the proportion of science and engineering doctorates climbed from 58% in 1977 to 76% in 2017. On this next figure, you will see the definite commitments for academic employment in the United States by these broad fields of study. And these data, again, are from the National Survey of Earned Doctorates that's administered by the National Science Foundation. So in 2017, 46% of all doctorate recipients with definite employment commitments, and this excludes postdoc positions, in the United States reported that their principal job would be in academia. So that's just under half are saying we're going to be working in academia. And you can see a wide range of variability by these broad fields of study. The lowest is in engineering, and the highest is in humanities and arts, which was just surpassed in 2017 slightly by other non-S&E fields. So you can see that there is a wide range of end careers for people who are pursuing doctoral degrees in these fields. So the highest rates of academic employment commitments were reported by doctorate recipients in the humanities and arts at 77%, and then in the non-S&E fields, slightly higher at 80%. The lowest rates, again, were in engineering at 14% and in physical sciences and earth sciences at 24%. So in the past 10 years, as we look at these data, the overall rate of academic employment commitments by doctorate recipients in science and engineering fields has declined, while that of doctorates in non-S&E fields or non-science and engineering fields has risen due to the increase in academic commitments in education. So that's largely where the increase over this time period has come. On this next figure, you'll see the median basic annual salary of doctoral recipients who have definite commitments for employment in the US. This again is done by very broad fields of study, as you'll see listed here along the x-axis. So in 2017, doctoral recipients who had definite commitments for a postdoc or other employed position, so this exceeds beyond just academic settings, in the coming year, reported basic annual salaries that varied by their field of study and by the type of position to which they committed. So in every field here, median salaries for doctorate recipients committing to jobs in industry were higher than those in postdocs and academia. So the industry or business positions are shown in green, postdocs in yellow, and the academy or in academia is in that blue color. Median salaries for postdocs in all fields were relatively similar, ranging from $46,000 to $50,000, except for postdocs in math and computer science, who had a median salary of $60,000. But in every broad field, postdoc salaries were lower than salaries reported by doctoral recipients entering non-postdoc employments in industry or academia. So you can take a look at these data to get a sense of just some general salary information. So what does this all mean? Well, based on these sources of data that I've consulted and reviewing a number of other resources, including an excellent text called the Academic Job Search Handbook, which is in its 5th edition, and other resources online, I only had time to prepare and present a few of these images and figures to you. That over time, there's been a decrease in tenure track faculty positions, while there has been overall an increase in the number of PhDs. We've also experienced, in terms of state or public institutions, public disinvestment in higher education. There has been some turning of the tide in this regard in some states where there have been large-scale bond initiatives and other funding initiatives and investments. And here in South Carolina, our state legislature is currently considering a number of pieces of legislation that would employ a greater investment in higher education. However, the ultimate impact of those investments is not going to completely fix years of public disinvestment. There's been an increase in demand for teaching due to undergraduate enrollment. So this is expected to continue until 2026, where there are so many college students right now in the 6-year period from their first year through the dashboard indicator of 6 years after start, that there's great demand for teaching because of these high levels of enrollment. Now you ask, why through 2026? Well, through 2026 is relevant because in 2008, during the modern era of recession, fewer babies were born. And so there is likely to be and has been a dip that we haven't fully recovered from in terms of those reaching their 18th birthday, which is a traditional time for entering into college as undergrads. And so there's also been an increase in cheaper labor. So rather than replace baby boomers who have left tenured faculty positions, there may be efforts to not replace that line, but to include adjunct positions or instructor positions or visiting positions. So just keep in mind these changes that are happening. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics has a very interesting statement about higher education instruction. Overall employment of higher education instructors is projected to grow from 2016 to 2026 by 15%, much faster than the average for all occupations. And the rationale for this is because of what had happened with the birth rate and more people going to college up until 2026. And then after that, there's expected to be a leveling or even a decline. And another note that the Bureau of Labor Statistics makes, related to several bullets up here, is that the majority of employment growth is likely to be in part-time positions. In terms of the market research that you're doing, here are some other examples that you can get general trends in your discipline, benchmarking specific faculty salaries, and then looking beyond salaries in terms of the environment that's going to be most suitable to support you. So this is all part of gathering this information. So let's take a look at trends in your discipline. So this table shows the median expected basic annual salary for those who have a doctorate in these broad fields of study and who have definite post-graduation plans for employment. And these are data that are in the United States. So what you can see here is that across all fields, that the median is $63,000 when we look across these broad fields of studies. And for those who are in academic employment, the range is from $50,000 to $120,000, with the highest median coming in business management and administration, and the lowest for humanities and arts. And again, that's in the academy, not in these other fields, to include industry or business, government, nonprofit organizations, or other unknown. Now, across all fields, the median expected basic annual salary for academia is $63,000, which is also the lowest across these different industries. Then other unknown, which captures a very wide range of potential employment sectors, nonprofit organizations, government, and then industry or business. So this is a good sense to get a lay of the land, and these data are available again through the Survey of Earned Doctorates. So when benchmarking faculty salaries specifically, using a resource like the faculty salary data that are available through the Chronicle can help you get a sense of the institution type and the data that are available. There also is a report available from Oklahoma State on faculty salaries, and those data are often used as benchmark to address issues related to salary compression in the academy. And it is a main resource that this institution uses to benchmark salary data for faculty members. So across these different position types, so professor, associate professor, assistant professor, instructor, lecturer, and unranked, you will see here that these are also for those who are designated at the highest level of Carnegie research activity. So this would be your traditional R1 institution. You'll see the range here. Now these are for all disciplines. For the 2017 to 2018 academic year. You also can look at these data by gender. You can look at these data for other years as well. So this is highest research activity. So R1s are going to fall into the highest. Now the next category is high. So you can see a slight change in the salaries. So let me go back to the previous slide where we see for assistant professors across all disciplines that the total is $93,000 roughly. And here when we look at this across all disciplines for assistant professor, it's almost $79,000, so about $14,000 difference. And again, this is across all disciplines within a particular institution. So we want to be able to dig deeper into the discipline to have a better understanding of what the benchmark might be. I also have taken a look at the University of South Carolina data that have been reported to the Chronicle. So you'll see that for professors, which are shown here in with the orange line, and as compared to other four-year public, you can compare these data to the rest of the state of South Carolina and also compare these data with other institutions that are designated with the highest level of research. So you can see in terms of in comparison to other four-year publics, we have usually been slightly above, with the exception being 2003, and now from 2016 to 17, you can see those data coming together slightly. Let's look at the data for associate professor, which much more closely mirror the four-year public data, and in fact have come back together here in 2017. And for assistant professor, also just slightly above, but also coming back together. So these are ways to see what the trends look like, as well as do individual year and rank comparisons. Another resource in the state of South Carolina and many other public institutions must report their faculty salaries that are above $50,000 annually. You can take a look at the state faculty salary database. And you can look within the University of South Carolina and look for these different position types. It's important for me to note a caveat here that the publicly reported data may be 9-month salary, 10-month salary, 10.5-month salary, 11-month salary, or 12-month salary. Tenure track and tenured faculty positions at the University of South Carolina without administrative or other responsibilities are most often 9-month appointments. If you are able to secure extramural grant funding or other sources through a fellowship or other for salary support, those funds are most often applied to summer salary, and then if you exceed the amount in summer, those funds are released back to your unit, but your overall compensation doesn't change. So you may see a salary that's posted at $52,590, for example, for an associate professor, but that salary may be a 9-month salary and may not be indicative of total compensation. So it's important to understand how these salaries are constructed. How would you know this? Well, aside from your participation in today's webinar, you could know this by talking to one of your mentors here at the University of South Carolina who is in a faculty role and would be able to explain to you some of the nuances of the publicly reported data. The same may be true of data for other states. The Oklahoma state data generally take into account the 9-month appointment, and all data are equalized at an annual appointment, which is the case for the Chronicle data. So you have to keep that in mind when you see what these ranges look like at our institution. Beyond salaries, it's very important that you take a look at other considerations. I've provided 2 examples here of what a faculty package may look like for you. So you can look at this Texas A&M faculty provisions package, as well as this blog that was included in Nature that discusses ways to negotiate a faculty startup package. So as faculty members, in addition to negotiating salary and benefits, may also be negotiating a startup package. These are funds that are most often used to support your research and scholarship. In the text I mentioned earlier called the Academic Job Search Handbook, there's information on the various aspects that you may negotiate. Startup packages are most common for people in laboratory-based sciences, but research startup funds are now being made available in other disciplines as well. If you're negotiating for a faculty position, especially a tenure-track faculty position, strongly recommend that you negotiate for a startup package. These are the funds that you're going to need to be able to launch and sustain your research program until you get your first grant. And even if you are bringing grant funding with you, still negotiate for these items. With these funds, you may be able to buy needed equipment and supplies, hire people, fund postdocs or graduate students, pay overhead costs. Space is also an issue that gets negotiated in a startup package. And there are sample startup budgets that are included in this Academic Job Search Handbook. And teaching load is something that can be negotiated, research assistance, computer resources, travel funds and conference expenses, including professional or society memberships, your start date, moving expenses and housing help, job hunting for a partner or spouse, and many other additional considerations. I could do a completely separate webinar only talking through startup packages, but in this particular webinar, focusing more on faculty salary and benefits with an important note about how a startup package is going to be negotiated at this time as well. It's very important to talk to your mentors to get an idea about what is usual or expected in your discipline. I want to say this with the utmost respect to the mentors and the knowledge they bring. It's also best to talk to people who have recently been on the job market because things change over time. So the way in which somebody negotiated 20 years ago for their faculty position may be very different from how they're negotiating a faculty position today. And especially in the changing landscape of the market, where if there are hundreds and hundreds of applicants for a single position, how do you weigh that in terms of your negotiation? So talking to someone who is new to that process can be a helpful way to expand your knowledge and understanding of what's going on in the market. So in terms of gathering information, after you are able to do your market research, benchmark salaries, look at trends in your discipline, get specifics on what's happening today, you want to make sure that you have this type of information. And these are some questions you can actually run by your mentors. You know, what do you already know? So give them the lay of the land. I looked at this resource and this is the range that I think is appropriate. I also looked at this database and this, and so that's informed this. What else should I be thinking about? You know that you're going to want to be able to clearly convey and articulate your values. So back to that first step of knowing yourself. And then second, the information you gather to establish your target salary range, as well as your resistance or walk away point, plus the value of benefits, and being able to think about how all of that fits with your budget and the geographic location. There are lots of different ways in which you can gather this information and may not be thinking about all of the information that you will need. So use these questions to help guide you in that process. So the next step is to actually negotiate. If you are to this point of negotiation, congratulations, you have been offered a faculty position. For the purposes of illustration in this webinar, I'm going to again use you have been offered a tenure track assistant professor position. Way to go. That's a huge accomplishment and something that you've been working towards through your doctoral degree program or terminal degree program. So as you prepare to negotiate, make sure that you don't panic. One of the things that happens when someone panics, and panic can be a good thing or a challenging thing, is that they often say, oh my gosh, they want me. They just gave me an offer. Yes, I'll take it. Once you say yes, you have completely lost your leverage and your potential power in having a conversation in the negotiation of your salary, benefits, and startup package, because you don't want to accept that first offer right away. Even if it ends up being the offer you ultimately accept, you don't want to accept it right away. You also want to make sure that you have the offer in writing. As I stated in the example I provided about what happens when an offer is coming up on winter break, when the entire university closes down for those several days in between the end of December and the first part of January. So we have to think about, can I get that in an email, or can I follow up in some way so you have an offer in writing? And you shouldn't do any negotiation until you have a formal offer in writing. Use your market research that you've gathered about the various ranges of faculty salaries, trends in the discipline, and you can look and find specific data for the institution, or as close as you possibly can through these various data resources that I've provided to you. Make sure you rely on your network of mentors and advisors during this process. I've helped coach doctoral students of my own, and even doctoral students who I've not worked closely with, but who knew that I'd been doing some of this work in this area, learning to understand best practices to help prepare doctoral students and terminal degree students for faculty negotiations, help them successfully negotiate these offers. I also have been fortunate to have the opportunity to negotiate these offers for myself. And remember, you don't have to justify your request. So every time you ask for something, you don't have to provide an alternate explanation or any explanation at all, in fact. Here are 8 steps that are from higher ed jobs in terms of the process of negotiating your salary. So I've aligned these recommendations with the Start Smart recommendations that I've shared with you today in overview format. So have a walkaway number, so that's your resistance point. Anchor up, not down, so that means that your target salary is the bottom end of your range, and then you go up to establish that range. In this particular article, the recommendation was 2%. Earlier, I shared with you to use at least 10%, and knowing the market and your value will help you understand what's reasonable here. Having exact numbers and not ranges ultimately will help you when it comes time to ask for a specific amount. Make sure that you are armed with the data. You don't need to lay it out, but be able to refer back to various sources that you've consulted and find out why the number may or may not be in line with those sources. There's a way to ask that thoughtfully to get some additional context. Know when to ask. So you don't want to go back and forth on every line of an offer letter. You want to have the offer letter, give yourself some time to process it, review it, talk with mentors, talk with family members as it's appropriate in your own situation, and then go back and say, here are questions that I have. This demonstrates your thoughtfulness in the process, and they will appreciate it on their end too, as they strive to provide you with the answers you need to make a good decision. And don't be ashamed in asking for what you need. You've done your homework, you've made a budget, you know where you need to be. Ask for it. Be confident in asking for it. And something that doesn't appear on here, I said it earlier, they want you. Congratulations on reaching this particular point. And as a reminder, here are the different aspects of what you can ask for at this time. These also come from the academic job search handbook that I referenced earlier. So it includes your salary, benefits, startup funds, maybe teaching release. I've learned in some disciplines that a first-year teaching release may not be common, but perhaps one at the start of your second year, third year, fourth year, as you're making good progress. But asking about time to get yourself acclimated and settled, or to be able to expand on your research and scholarship, is appropriate as part of this. In my department, this is again where disciplines and units specifically matter. Incoming faculty generally have a first semester teaching release. So most of our faculty members start in the fall semester. They do not teach in the fall semester. They will not teach a course until the spring semester. And every effort is made to ensure that the course that ultimately will be taught is one that is methodologically aligned with their interests, or topically aligned with their interests, or can be, so that it is not quite so much as a new course preparation that would be required. Some people will ask for guaranteed sabbaticals at different points. So for example, we have a process at this institution, so this would not be something to negotiate here unless you were someone further along in your faculty career, not a newly minted PhD. Computer, printer, software, other equipment, conference travel, professional development funds, moving expenses, summer salary. As I mentioned, the vast majority of faculty contracts here at the University of South Carolina are 9 months. And so you do not have your summer salary covered. For R1 institutions, you may ask for PhD student support or graduate student support. If this is a next position for you, so this is not necessarily your first position, you may want to ask for a modification in rank or tenure status and spousal hires. So these are all things that you can negotiate. What you should negotiate for are things that will help you be successful, and being sure that you know the tenure and promotion expectations in your discipline. Because you want to make sure that by knowing yourself and having thought through the type of environment you're going to need to meet those criteria and advance successfully as a tenure track assistant professor are very important. Remember to take a breath when you get the offer. Do this in writing as much as possible. There will be phone conversations. Follow up later if the person with whom you spoke does not, in email, to document your understanding of what was discussed. What these types of negotiations, as much as you can, keeping them in writing, is just good practice for you. And you always have room to negotiate. But remember, once you agree to their terms, you generally do not have the ability to go back and make changes. So one thing that we are unable to do in the format of this webinar, webinar was originally envisioned as a workshop. There would be interactive activities, and we would be doing a lot more discussion than perhaps is feasible in this format. We would go through this scenario more specifically, but this is the gist of the scenario. So imagine if this was the offer presented to you, how would you apply the steps shared with you today to consider this particular offer? In some instances, you may have the opportunity to review multiple offers. And let me say that the timing of these offers can be the most challenging aspect. Maybe you are in a discipline where you've been offered a postdoc, but also feel really good about your chances for a tenure track assistant professor position for which you've interviewed on campus. These are hard situations and require discussions with your mentor. It is a luxury to have these multiple opportunities, and they often come at different times. So being forthcoming about your situation without all of the extra details. You don't need to tell one institution where the offer came from. You can just say, I've recently received an offer for a tenure track assistant position at another institution. I wanted to check with you on the status of my candidacy for the tenure track assistant professor position at your institution. So being forthcoming about that information without a lot of additional details exhibits professionalism and can get you to the point where you may have more than one offer. Maybe you do have 2 or 3 offers in hand, which does happen. Thinking about back to that knowing yourself, your budget, what you need to be successful, what the market will bear, using all of that, go ask for what you want if all other conditions are equal. But making sure that you talk with your mentor and think back to knowing yourself is going to be a really important part of this process. Here are a few faculty salary negotiation resources. And if you're watching this webinar, whether you're participating live or if you're viewing the recorded version, please email gradprofdev@sc.edu to receive a PDF of these. If you've registered for the webinar as of today, an email will be sent shortly after the conclusion of the webinar with a PDF of the handouts. However, if you're newly participating or you don't receive them, make sure to send an email. So the Career Center has some general information on salary negotiations. The American Association of University Professors produces a salary compensation report, information on the importance of negotiation in academia, and different strategies for how you can negotiate. In particular, the Cheeky Scientist resource is most relevant to those in the sciences, but has some concepts that I think are broadly applicable regardless of your discipline. So again, you want to know yourself and be able to clearly articulate, convey your value, and know the type of environment that you need to be in to be successful as a faculty member. Those are important in determining to where you will apply and also to where you will consider ultimately during the negotiation phase. Be sure to do market research to be able to establish a target salary and benefits that is within your budget, and having a good strategy for how you will approach this comes from the practice that you will do. So we will have time for questions, and while you're writing your questions, in the questions ribbon on the webinar toolbar, I'm going to run through some of our spring professional development offerings for you. So first, the full schedule of Grad Prof Dev events has been released and has been sent through email. You also can access this information through the grad school calendar and social media. Registration information for all of these events is available on the graduate school's calendar using the link provided. The only information that isn't included here in the spring 2020 schedule are the events that we are planning for Graduate Student Appreciation Week, which is April 6th through 10th. A separate announcement and flyer will be released before spring break, and we'll keep popular offerings such as the chair massages and professional headshots, which you need if you're on the faculty job market during this week when we celebrate our nearly 6,000 graduate students. Specifically, I wanted to share with you some information about some of the events being offered in the month of February, including today's webinar focusing on faculty salary negotiation, and in particular, our virtual career expo. So all of you may be interested in pursuing faculty positions. but perhaps you have colleagues or peers in your degree programs who are interested in other options. Here are ways that you can take time to meet recruiters live online during our participation in the PhD and Master's Virtual Career Expo on February 26th. Each Friday during the academic year, we post on a specific professional development topic on Fridays. When possible, we align our programming with the social media topic, which is a little different for this week because today's topic is leadership. We also want to hear from you about your experiences with professional development programming and your ideas for future programs. Please take a few minutes to access our survey. We do this once a year. It's very important for us to get this feedback. It's actually how we received information from you as grad students telling us that you wanted something that was focused on faculty salary negotiations. So that's how this came to be and was added to the professional development schedule of offerings. The call for applications for the 2020 to 2021 cohort of the Graduate Civic Scholars Program is open until the deadline, which is 5 p.m. on February 17th. And if you're interested, you can visit these resources. It's a really great program for graduate students who are interested in civic and engaged scholarship. It's Love Data Week, which is a national observation, and the university libraries here at South Carolina is pleased to offer a number of activities, including some today during Love Data Week. It's also Leadership Week here at the University of South Carolina, and during this week, we are featuring blogs from graduate student leaders that you can access, and there also is a full calendar of events university-wide. University Libraries is offering Sharp Grads. This will be the third time that they're offering this, and it's on March 12th. And it is a series of programs focused on skills, habits, and research for graduate students to offer professional development skills and training. So the free program, again, is during spring break on March 12th and will consist of a series of interactive workshops. And space is limited for this. It always fills up quickly. Discover USC is April 17th, and presenter registration, the deadline is March 6th. There will be no late submissions this year accepted for graduate students. We have to stick to the March 6th deadline. And if you're a graduate student who doesn't have anything to present this year, please consider joining us as a volunteer or a reviewer, and that deadline is March 27th. So again, here's the direct link to presenter registration. We also did a webinar last Friday on writing abstracts for Discover USC, and you can access the recorded version of that webinar. If you have any questions about Discover USC, please contact Wright Culpepper, who's here in the graduate school. A couple of other resources where you can get information on faculty positions, faculty negotiations, take skill building courses, participate in different writing boot camps through the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. The university has an institutional membership, and you can join for free using your U of SC email address. The university also has an institutional membership to the National Postdoctoral Association, and as is the case with the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity and the National Postdoc Association, resources are very relevant for graduate students too. All right, let me take a look at the questions that we have. It looks like we have a couple of questions here. So the first question is, I know you already touched on this a bit, but could you elaborate a bit more? Is it customary for a potential employer to give you some deadline for your decision, as in you have 2 weeks to make the decision? So if you have multiple applications, or I think multiple offers, what is the best strategy to handle a situation like this? Well, first of all, you can always ask for an extension if that's important to you, but you being forthcoming about your multiple offers is equally important. Talking with your mentors to get coached through this is also another potential strategy to use. but it does happen. In fact, right now, I'm aware of a doctoral student here on campus who has received an offer for a postdoc position. It's a great position. It's a position that she would very much like to accept, but she also had a couple of really good interviews for tenure track assistant professor positions. And so in her discipline, should she be able to secure one of those tenure track positions, she would go that route versus the postdoc route. But yet the postdoc offer has been made to her. So in that situation, I think she's going to work with the postdoc offer to let them know the situation without a lot of extra details and ask for an extension. If you have the two offers in front of you, it's a little bit more challenging. You can always ask for extensions. They do happen. I'm aware recently here on campus of some offers that were extended to faculty candidates wherein they asked for the weekend and a couple of days. So they were supposed to say, give a response by Friday. And they said, could I have the weekend to really talk this over with my family? And could I get back to you on Tuesday? So there are different ways without giving a lot of extra details that you could ask for some more time to consider various offers. I do want to really go back to this, talking to your mentors to help you navigate in your discipline. Some disciplines would not go for that. Some disciplines and some institutions would say, it's a hard deadline. This is the deadline. You have to give us your answer. So then you would be in a position to have to reflect on an environment. Is this an environment where I can be successful? Have I been able to negotiate to a point where I know I will have the resources I need to be successful? And is this someplace I could see myself working? So it comes back to those along with, in combination, your market research and the other work that you're doing. That's the only question so far. So does anyone else have another question? We still have a couple of minutes left. So just as a reminder, I hope you will take a few minutes to do the Grad Prof Dev survey that we are running right now. It's easily accessible. It doesn't take a lot of time. And if you fill it out, you also have a chance to win some of our many prizes that we'll be giving away. Your feedback is so important for us to come up with programs that will give you information to help you be successful during your graduate degree program, but also beyond as you pursue your career pathway to a meaningful job after your degree program. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in right now. As I mentioned, as soon as the webinar concludes, I'll send an email with the handouts that were posted for today. If you're viewing this at a later time and you did not receive the handouts, or if you're viewing only the recorded version, please email us at gradprofdev@sc.edu to get a copy of today's handouts. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.